So this is notes 3.3, but we're going to start out with a review of 3.1 to 3.2 just to kind of reinforce what we did the lesson before. What I would like you to do on this section is to find the x and y intercept for each of these functions, graph it, identify the 0, and then remember 0 is x-intercept. Switch the equation to y equals. Y equals is also considered f of x equals. That's another way to think of it. Then create a points table. Okay, so your points table is going to go down here. What numbers do you pick? You just pick the ones that are easiest for you. You might consider that if you have a 1/2 in front of the x, maybe you go by 4s. If you have a 1/3 in front of the x, maybe you count by 3s. It just makes the math a little bit simpler when you're doing this. And then I want you to complete that part of it as well. All right, so pause the video. Try this on your own. Really try it on your own. And then we'll be back with the answers. Let's check the first one. So on the first one, you should have gotten an x-intercept of 8. Again, if you just cross off this term right here, then all that's left is that x. So x equals 8. And then to get the y-intercept, that what happens when x equals 0. So I'm just going to cross off this one. And then I have negative 2y equals 8, so y equals negative 4. And then when you write the x-intercept and the y-intercept, I would like these to be in coordinate point form, just because these are the easiest for people, even all the way up into algebra and pre-calculus and all of that, to mix up. So practice this doing the x-intercept with 8, 0, y-intercept 0, negative 4. 0 and x-intercept are the same thing. When we solve for y, that work is down here. Remember, you take away x from both sides because we want the negative 2y to be by itself. And then once you get the negative 2y by itself, you're dividing by negative 2. Now right here, see that negative x over negative 2? Think of it first as in terms of the negatives. A negative divided by a negative is a positive, so those go away. Then you have x over 2. X over 2 is the same thing as 1/2 x. We're building up to slope. That's on this lesson. So I want you to write these in this form. X over 2 is okay, but 1/2 x is okay because then you can identify the slope better. So the equation for this is y equals 1/2 x minus 4. Now that you know the x-intercept, 8, 0, and the y-intercept, 0, negative 4, then you can put dots there, and then you can cross or draw your line all the way across, and you have your line. The points table, if you notice, I picked on mine negative 2. I picked multiples of 2. Whatever the denominator is of this number in front of the x, if you can count by that one, it makes the math a lot easier. You could have picked 1, and that would have been okay, but then you have fractions. But math people are sometimes very lazy, not really lazy. We always look for patterns to make everything easier. So this is 1/2 times 2 minus 4, which is just negative 3. And then for this one, you plug it in and you get negative 2. And we can go to the graph and check that we did it right. So at negative 2, I should have a negative 6. So if I look at my drawing, something's not quite right. So let me go back and check that. So if I go back to the graph, it looks like this might be negative 5 at negative 2. So let's check the math. 1/2 times negative 2 equals negative 1 minus 4. So my negative 6 is off. It should be negative 5. So it's always a good idea to go back and check. And also look at this pattern. Everything here is changing by 2's. We're adding 2 to get from one line to the next. Over here, we're adding 1's to every term to get to the next one. So if I had paid attention to that as well, then I would have seen that, oh, that negative 6 didn't fit the pattern. There's a pattern in these tables, and we'll talk about that more. All right, so let's check what you did on this one. If you haven't done this one because you couldn't figure out the first one, then go try this one, pause the video. All right, so did you get these answers? 3, 0 for the x-intercept, 0, 6 for the y-intercept, 0 is 3, 0. So remember, x-intercept and 0 mean the same thing. Solving for y is y equals negative 2x plus 6. So my table, I picked negative 1, 0, 1, 2. There's no fractions. It's just the easy numbers to stick in there, and you get your y value for this. The domain and range for each of these is all real numbers. Again, that symbol with the double line means all real numbers. And the reason why is because any number on the x-axis works. Any number on the y-axis will be the result. There's no gaps in that line, so that has a domain and range of all real numbers. Positive and negative slope. I don't know if you remember, but if something is a positive slope, as we read from left to right, we go up. As we read from left to right, we go down. So this would be a positive slope for this one. This one would be a negative slope for this one, because this one goes down from left to right. In algebra, we always go left to right, up, down, as far as order goes with these lines. So it's just like you would read left to right, up to down. Okay, x values. X values are independent. Y values are dependent. So now we're to the new part of our lesson, which really should be review for you, but if it's not, then that's okay. We'll go with it. But rate of change is the same thing as slope when we come to these graphs. Rate of change you should be able to find from a table, a graph, and through 2 points. Remember that you can get your points from these tables, right? So when x equals -1, y equals 8. When x equals 0, y equals 6. So I can turn a table into coordinate points, which I can turn into a graph. And if for any time when you're doing these linear equations you don't have a straight line, go back and check your numbers, because it should be a straight line. So slope. Slope is the rate of change. The rate of change is always going to be the change in y over the change in x. Okay, and I want you to think that you rise before you run. If you get up in the morning, you have to rise first before you get up. So it's always rise before you run. So rise is always on the top, run is always on the bottom. So you might have heard of this as rise over run. Another way is y over x with a little triangle in front means the change in y over the change in x. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 is another way to do it. The difference of the y's from the second point minus the difference of the y from the first point all over the x from the second point minus the x from the first point. You decide which one is the first and second point. Just make sure that the second point and first points line up and down above each other. And slope is the steepness of the line. So if something is more steep, it goes up and down for a positive slope like that. It's really steep. Think of a roof. You wouldn't want to be on a roof like that. The roof going the other direction also is steep. You'd fall down first. Less steep is more flat. Okay, so the more flat it is, the less steep it is. Positive slope goes up from left to right. Negative slope goes down from left to right. A zero slope is horizontal. An undefined slope is up and down. Okay, zero slope we call M, and for this one M is undefined. We're going to talk about hoivux at the end of this to help you with that. Okay, Slope Dude is a great video. We'll watch it in class, but if you want to watch it before, Slope Dude on YouTube, Google it and you'll see something just amazing. Just kidding. All right, so we're going to find the slope between these 2 points. If you already know this and want to just check your skills, you can pause the video here. Otherwise, just pay attention. So I'm going to pick my point 1 and my point 2. Doesn't matter which one is which, as long as you're consistent as you're doing this equation. So the slope equals the y value from the second one minus the y value from the first one, all over the x value from the, oh, I switched it, sorry. Based on what my numbers are, this is a 2. So 5 minus 2, you can tell what order I usually do these. 5 minus 2, that's a y2. This is my y2 minus my y1. My x2 is 4 minus my x1, which is -3. Watch the double negatives. If it helps, you can write it like this first and then stick your numbers in. So 5 minus 2 is 3. 4 minus the negative 3 is 7. So this has a slope of 3/7. It's positive, so it's going to go up from left to right. So keep that in mind when you go over to your drawing and plot these. So here's what we do. We put the point negative 3, 2 on here. So I go to x equals negative 3 and up to 2 and put a dot. And then I'm going to go to 4, 5. And over 4 up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and put a dot. Here's my line. Now in math we always work left to right. So if I start at the left point, from here I'm going to rise first before I run. The rise is 3. The run is 7. This is the rise. This is the run. So from a graph, if I gave you that graph, you should be able to tell me that the slope is a rise of 3 over a run of 7. Rise always goes on top. Run always goes on the bottom. You rise before you run. So you try the next one if you haven't already. Pause the video and make sure you can do this. So the slope of this one you should have gotten 2. Graphed it, it looks like that. Now a word about finding the slopes from these graphs. Sometimes we'll ask you to find the slope from a graph and you won't have any dots on there that are obvious. But you find the dots that are close to the intersection of these grids. And then you can make coordinate points there and find the difference from those. We'll do a little bit of that in a minute. Okay, so the next thing is if we have a slope and it's 1/2, but we don't know this value, just go and plug it into the equation, y2 minus y1, and then see what's left over and solve for it. So I'm going to use this as my point 1, this is my point 2. So the difference of the y's is 2 minus 3 over r minus 6. Now we just had a unit where we talked about how to solve this. So you're going to put those in parentheses. First I'm going to simplify it though, that'll be better. So this is 1/2 equals negative 1 over r minus 6. So I'm going to package that up because it has a plus or minus in the denominator, and I'm going to cross multiply. So this is 1 times r minus 6 equals negative 2. Distribute my 1, and then add 6 to both sides. So I get r equals 4. And then I go back and just kind of check it. If I were to put 4 back in, would I get the right answer? So 2 minus 3 over 4 minus 6 equals negative 1 over negative 2. So that equals 1/2. So I did it right. Check your work. All right, pause the video and try the next one. All right, so check your work. Did you get a P of 5? If not, check and make sure you did your negatives. A word about this negative 5/5. This can be negative 5 over 8. Or it can be 5 over 8 when we do negative 8 when we do this. But it cannot be negative 5 over negative 8. You have one negative, you have to give it to the numerator or the denominator. I chose to give it to the numerator. Okay, slope of a line from a graph. If I give you a graph like this, or like this, without any coordinate points on it again, you're going to find your own coordinate points. So like for example, this point that I chose, because it was where the grid crossed the graph. And then that happens right here too. Or I could have used this point. It doesn't matter which one you use because you're going to have the same slope. No matter which 2 points you use, whether I use the first, second, third, fourth, or fifth one on this line. So just find the nice points without decimals. If they cross in the middle of these, those have decimals, and that's an approximation of your points. Okay, I'm going to pause this video right here. We're going to go into a second part B video because we want to talk about the slope of a line from a graph. I want to do this in one thing, so go to the next video for me. So this is part A. It's the end of it. We'll go to part B.